For all of the hoopings that you do, you start out with the first color, and you can use any thread color you want, but you start with a placement stitch on your stabilizer and then place the fabric on top. So that's what I'm doing here with the hands. And then the next stitch will tack down, these are the hands and feet, and it will do the finger and toenails. That's an option. You can skip that if you don't like those. And then you come back and you put your second piece of fabric right side down to cover the first piece. There's 2 layers there. And go ahead and stitch the seams. And that gives you all the hand and foot seams. You can remove the hand and feet from the hoop, and if you look at the back, their placement stitches on the stabilizer are your guide for how to cut out the hands and feet. There are 2 different hands and feet available. There's the hands and feet with separate toes and fingers, like this one that I'm showing. It's the more difficult one. And then there's an easier one that has joined fingers and toes. And I won't be showing that one. I'm going to show the more difficult one, but the joined fingers and toes are just much easier. You don't have to cut in between the fingers and toes like on this one. You can see on the fabric side where the seams are, and that's really the side you should look at when you're cutting, but you can use that placement stitch on the stabilizer as a guide just to kind of show you just how small that seam allowance needs to be. You can cut out the hands the same way you did the feet. There's really no difference between the two. And I like to go ahead and cut out the outlines first. Then I come back with some small detail scissors and cut in between the fingers and toes. You want to get as close to the stitch line as you can, but don't cut your stitches. That's very important. And then you can remove the stabilizer after you've cut everything. Remove a little bit of the extra bulk from the tips of the fingers or toes. The feet are done the same way. Just clip in between each toe. Don't cut your stitches, and then remove the bulk. You don't have to have it perfectly rounded, just trim those little corners off. And I like to go ahead and remove, because I used a black thread for my placement stitches so I could see it easily, but I don't want that to show through my fabric, so I go ahead and kind of pull those away. That's an option. You don't have to do that. And you can remove as much or as little stabilizer as you want, but it's easier to turn these right side out if you've removed most of the stabilizer from the hands and feet. This is really the hardest part of making the Yeti, is if you're doing these separated hands and toes, or hands and feet, it's the hardest part. Otherwise, the rest of the project goes pretty easily. But this is why I have rated this as an advanced project, because of these tiny parts. For turning right side out, I go ahead and I'm using hemostats for this one here to show you how this is done. You just poke the seam in between the jaws of the hemostats and pull it through. This is double time here, but it can go very quickly once you're practiced with using hemostats. And then you go ahead and, after you've pulled each toe inside the foot, then you can turn the rest of the foot. And hemostats are good for opening up those seams and really spreading those out. And that's one foot out of the way. Another tool you can use, this is called an easy point and turn, I believe is the name of this tool, and you can use this as well. It does fit into the small hands, fingers and toes on this project. So either the hemostats or the easy point and turn both work for turning these. Another trick that I'll let you in on, if you're having a hard time getting a good grip on the fabric, if you moisten your hand, put a little like a wet paper towel or something there and just get your hand a little bit wet, you'll get a much better grip on the fabric, and it makes turning these much easier. If you need more information on how to turn small parts like this, I have a separate video that goes into much more detail. And same as before, I'm using a smaller pair of hemostats here just to show that you can use any kind of smaller, a real tiny little jaw or a wider jaw like the one I used earlier. Either one of those will work, or the easy point and turn. So there's a hand and foot turn, and I'll go ahead and do the other two. And that's what they look like when they're all turned right side out, little toenails there. And let's move on to the head. We're going to do the placement stitch on our stabilizer again, and then place the face fabric right side up, a little piece of clear topper on top of that so that our stitches look nice and crisp. And then I'm just going to speed through the stitching of the face. You just need 2 colors for the face, white and black, or some other dark color. It's going to do the eyes, the mouth, all of that good stuff. The only other thread color you really need in this project is something that blends with your fabrics. And that's for your seams and, between the fingers and toes, things like that. And now it does a placement stitch for the next part, and it gives you a little arrow there that shows you want the fur pointing down. That's that arrow at the bottom. I removed the clear topper, have a nicely stitched face, and now I'm going to put a little bit of stuffing down into the nose. Just wiggle it in there with hemostats or tweezers. It gives it some dimension. And for the front of the head, fur pointing down, but you want this fabric to be right side up. Cover all those placement stitches, and that fur should be pointing down. We're going to do a reverse applique, so it's going to stitch 2 seams around that face area. And then take that off the machine again, and now we're going to cut away just the fur. So get a little hole started and use some applique scissors or curved scissors to cut as close to that seam and reveal the face underneath. And that's our reverse applique. If you don't want the stitches to show, you can use a pin, just a stick pin, and just kind of rub it, scratch back and forth. Don't disturb the stitches, but you can get the fur to kind of cover that seam. It's like erasing the stitches there, but the stitches are still there, just the fur is covering them up. And the back of the head, again, we want the fur to be pointing downwards. And this is right side or correct side, the fuzzy side down. Put that on the machine, and now it does the head seam, and it leaves an opening at the bottom. And again, it's double stitched. All the seams are double stitched in this project. Take it out of the hoop, and the head is very easy to cut and turn. Again, you can use your stabilizer placement stitches as your cutting guide, or you can just turn it over to the other side and see exactly where your seam is. Just cut that out and turn that right side out with your hands. Easy peasy. It's a cute little face. For the body, similar things, placement on the stabilizer, and it gives you a little arrow that shows the direction of the fur at the top there. So you place the first piece furry side up and another piece furry side down so that the furry sides are touching, and make sure the fur is pointing down on both pieces. And then you stitch the seams. This is double stitched. It does one side first, goes down and then back up, and then does the other side same way. And there's little jump stitches in between the arms and feet and the side opening where you're going to turn and stuff it. So there's the seams of the Yeti's body. And the body's very easy to cut out. Just again, follow the placement lines on your stabilizer as your guide if you want to, or you can flip it over and just cut your seam allowance on the other side, the fabric side. But you don't want to leave too much of a seam allowance because it can change the look of your finished doll. Now we're ready to turn him right side out, and a general rule of thumb is to always start with the smallest parts first and turn them into the body cavity in this case. So the neck is the smallest. I'm going to get that pulled into the body first. A lot of people try to turn the main part of the body first and then try to do the smaller parts. It's much harder that way, I find. So do the smaller parts first. Now I'm going to pull the arms into the body. Again, using hemostats, or you could use the easy point and turn for this as well. And then once you get everything pulled inside that body, then you just flip the body right side out and all those small parts come out for you. I'm going to use the blunt end of my hemostats to push out all of those seams, get him turned really nicely. Or her. I think this is the girl. I'm not sure. And we're ready to assemble. Now we're ready to assemble our Yeti, and I've already put the armature in. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to glue some, these are just little pieces of popsicle stick. You could use some cereal box chipboard or cardboard or something. This is just to give him some flatter feet because the Yeti's a little bit heavy, and so that will keep him from toppling over. That's what the armature will look like, and there's a separate video on how to build armatures for any type of doll like this, so I'll refer to that video instead. But once the armature is inside the Yeti and the little popsicle sticks are glued on the feet there, I'm just going to slip the feet over like socks and make sure that the big toes are in the middle. You'll be sad if you get way past this point and realize that the toes are on the wrong sides. And then I'm just putting a little bit of stuffing inside. You could also stuff the toes individually if you want. I just didn't do it on this one, but that's a really great look too. And then just stuff the feet. You're kind of doing a soft sculpture with your stuffing there. Turn it around, and I'm getting the backs of the legs too so that you don't really see the wire poking out or anything. And I've said this before in the instructions, but it's worth mentioning again. Any doll with wiring in it should not be given to small children. This is designed as an art doll for adults or much older children, not for little kids. And then I'm just using a little bit of hot glue with a detailed tip. This does not need to be pretty because we're going to come back and cover that with some fur later on, so don't worry too much about that. And then you will stuff the legs and feet and the bottom of the body and go ahead and get that filled out nicely. Give him kind of a pot belly. That's a nice look too. And then you just bend the feet up. That's all you got to do there. For the hands, these are just pipe cleaners. Some people call them chenille stems. And I cut them into fourths, so they're 3 inches each. And I bend the little tips down and put 1 in each finger. And then pull that hand out of the way and twist those 4 pipe cleaners together. And then you want to make sure, again, that the thumbs are in the middle, or pointing towards the head. Make sure that you orient the hands correctly. And I like to use electrical tape. This is the best kind of tape to stick to wires. It's made to stick to wires. It's a little bit stretchy, but it also can come off easily if you need to redo this. And just wrap it around the pipe cleaner and the armature part of the hand. And that attaches those together. It's on there nice and tight. And then same thing, just tuck the hand into the arm. And glue that up, and we'll do that on both sides. You could also hand stitch if you prefer. I just like to use hot glue in these tutorials because it goes so much faster. But a ladder stitch or whatever you prefer there also works. And this time I got smart. I used a little clip to hold that in place so that I didn't have to come back and get it in the right spot again. Tuck in his hand, glue it in. All right. Now we're going to stuff the arms and the top part of the body. And you don't need to stuff very tightly. When you have a wire armature, that's going to hold the shape for you. So you just want to use enough stuffing to get it filled out. Especially like that little belly area. I want to give him kind of a pot belly. I keep saying him, but this is the one with the eyelashes. So, you know, whatever. And then just tuck that turning tab in, and you can either hot glue or ladder stitch this closed. And if you make a mess with the hot glue like I just did, any kind of old pin, I keep a pin around for this very reason. Just push that in, the fabric in with that pin, and you can cover up that glue nicely. There we go, clip that until it dries. And for the head, go ahead and stuff the head pretty firmly because there's not any wire that's going to be in there. So we want to get a nice firm shape on the head. And tuck in the bottom part. I've got my strong thread on my long doll needle, and I'm going to do a running stitch all the way around the bottom of the head, about 1/4 inch from the edge. And this long needle makes it easy to do several stitches at a time. And then tuck that back in and pull those threads, and that's going to close up the bottom of the head. And now you'll probably want to adjust the stuffing to make sure that the chin and the back of the head and the sides, that everything is filled out nicely. Because when you gather those threads, it tends to make it kind of pucker around the front of the face. And we don't want that. So just make sure you get that stuffed so that it's flattened out more. See that? Okay, and then the head is going to go on top of that neck stem. Word of advice, get those arms out of the way, because as you're working with needle and thread, I promise you those hands are going to be grabbing at that thread. So just bend those out of the way, and makes it much easier. So I've pulled the threads tight so that it's kind of hugging that neck stem, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a knot. And then you can just take a few stitches to attach the head. You could ladder stitch all the way around if you want to, but I'm just doing a few stitches so that the head doesn't fall off, but it is loose enough that the head will still swivel, so I can get different looks with the Yeti. You can do it either way. Just ladder stitch it completely on, or just do a few stitches so the head swivels. It's up to you. I tried to figure out what fur I wanted to use, and here is a word of advice as well. White fur is so much easier to match than this beige that I found, and I needed to do the beige for this video so that you could see what was going on, because white just gets lost in the background. But it was very hard to find a fur that matched. I got as close as I could. It's not my favorite. The white turned out so much better. And, you know, typically what Yetis are white, but you can do whatever color. You can make it purple, green. It's get creative, go crazy. This is a faux fur yarn that I'm using as trim, and this goes on very quick, but you could also use faux fur and just cut little strips of it. Less than 1 inch wide usually works well. And then just glue it around. In this case, I'm doing 2 layers, like go around twice with this yarn. You could also cut triangles for the chest hair. You could do kind of a square or circle shape to do the head. That looks really nice. You could do just the top of the head. You could do the whole back of the head. Just add some fur embellishment wherever you like and make a unique Yeti. Put a little bit around the neck, kind of like a necklace, and just glue that down. I'm using a little more than 1 yard of this fur yarn. It doesn't really take a whole lot. I'm trying to figure out how I want the hair to look. A lot of options. Kind of an Eskimo thing there. Different colors. Couldn't decide. There, let's go with this off-white color. I love this curly fur. It makes everything look great. So I'm just cutting it sort of in the shape of the top of the head, that's all. And then glue that on. Again, these are not play dolls, so I don't expect children to be playing with them and pulling on the fur and things. They're mainly just to set on a shelf and look at, so it doesn't have to be super strongly on there. Get that hair out of the way. And then I just got the rest of the yarn and kind of covered up the edges of the fur. You can also tuck the fur under and do like your own little hem, glued or stitched on, however you want to hide those edges. But with really long fur, sometimes you can just glue it on and the fur itself covers up the raw edge, so you don't have to do anything. And there she's done. She's got the posable hands here. She's pointing, not making an obscene gesture, I promise. That's the problem with 4 fingers. A little bit more fur just to fill out the head. She's done. And that's how you make a Yeti. There's her boyfriend. Look, all white. See how he's got the triangle shape plus a strip on the back for his fur, and then just kind of a circle or square shape to cover up the top of his head is all that is. Could even give her a hairstyle. And that is how you make a Yeti in the hoop of your embroidery machine.